In past reviews, you've heard me talk about Roald Dahl and his role in really defining the scope of children's literature today. But there is another children's author who, like Dahl, really defined what children's literature is and should be, and inspired a lot of today's children's authors. I am, of course, talking about Madeleine L'Engle, and today I will be looking at one of her classic pieces of children's literature, A Wrinkle in Time. It's honestly hard to say why I like this book so much. I read it as a kid, and I think most of us did too, and people love it. It's a classic story. I mean, obviously it has well-developed characters, an intriguing premise, and an interesting and unique look at the universe. But when you think about it, the plot is actually a fairly simple one. It's good versus evil, and evil is defeated due to the power of love. It's a story that we've read many, many times. So why is this one so special? Well, there are three reasons, and I can't remember the first one. Excuse me a moment. First of all, just from a personal perspective, this book is a melding of two of my favorite literary genres, science fiction and fantasy. There are a lot of scientific concepts that are explored in this book, but there's also a lot of magical stuff, and a lot of stuff that just plain cannot be explained. In fact, the idea of a tesseract, which is basically the centerpiece for this novel, is an incredibly complicated one. And yet Madeleine L'Engle explains it in such a way that a 7-year-old boy reading this book for the first time can actually grasp it. And yet she doesn't make it overly complicated. She doesn't hammer out explanation after explanation just to show us how intelligent she is, and yes, I'm looking at you, Isaac Asimov. Things are explained only as far as they need to be, and they are still endlessly fascinating. And actually, it's the simplicity of the story that makes these complicated concepts so easy to grasp. We might not completely understand how a tesseract works, but we can grasp the idea of an evil cloud, okay? Another reason this book is so popular is the protagonist, Meg Murray. Meg is every insecure 11-year-old girl who is told that she's not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, whatever. She has so much in her that readers can relate to, and yet she is still a unique and interesting character, and her growth in this story is phenomenal. She starts off as kind of a bystander, almost like somebody who got swept into this journey by accident. The other two kids in the story, Charles Wallace, her brother, and Calvin, the neighbor boy, are both extremely intelligent people who have a little bit of a better understanding of what's going on. And Meg doesn't, and we don't really understand why she's with them, because she's really just not on their level as far as her understanding is concerned. And then over time, her character grows and learns more, and at the end, she's the one to save the day, simply by being who she is, the one thing that everyone told her she should not be. Her hope is our hope, and her frustrations are our frustrations. And L'Engle manages to capture that balance between having a character be relatable and universal and still be interesting, which is a balance that a lot of authors don't manage. But probably the main reason why this story is so popular, and certainly the reason why I like it so much, is because it treats its audience like adults. Madeleine L'Engle does not sit down with the intent of writing a story for children. She sits down with the intent of writing a compelling and interesting story, and if children happen to like it, so much the better. Therefore, she doesn't dumb anything down. This story is smart. It has a lot of complicated concepts, of course. It has a lot of big vocabulary words, and it has a lot of references to great works of literature like Shakespeare and also great philosophers. Madeleine L'Engle's philosophy for children's literature is basically, if a kid comes across a word or a concept that he doesn't understand, he can damn well look it up and learn something. Plus, even though the story is simple, the issues it addresses are not, and the line between good and evil is not always clear-cut. Evil doesn't always have a horrible, dark, monstrous face, and yes, I'm looking at you, Disney movie. Sometimes the face of evil is nothing more than a blank, apathetic stare. And sometimes evil looks completely benign, even friendly. And it also addresses issues like the true definition of freedom, the true definition of equality, and all these really complicated, thinky issues that you wouldn't think you'd find in a children's book. And there are also a lot of really dark moments in this story, like when Meg realizes that her father cannot fix everything. This is something that every kid goes through, learning that their parents are not infallible, that they are flawed human beings just like everybody else, and it can be a very traumatic time. And the story doesn't end with a huge, sweeping victory. We want Meg to defeat the antagonist, to drive back this evil cloud, and to free the people of this planet. But that's not what happens. Meg doesn't save the world, she just saves her brother, and that is victory enough for her. It's a small victory, but it's still a victory. It doesn't have to have a Disney-fied ending, and yes, I am once again looking at you, Disney movie. The book directly addresses these issues and doesn't shirk away from them. It treats us like intelligent, thinking adults, and that is why we love it so much. More children's literature needs to be like this. I cannot emphasize that enough. Kids are smart, and they can handle it. And so if you couldn't tell by now, yes, A Wrinkle in Time is still a favorite. It's a classic piece of literature. It deserves to be a classic piece of literature, and I hope it remains on many, many children's bookshelves for a long, long time. And from the sublime to the ridiculous, we now go to the next book on the favorites list, which is Jennifer Murdley's Toad by Bruce Coville. I'm caught up now. Yay. Bye, everyone.